Welcome to the October 9th, 2024 Lower Merion Board of Commissioners meetings. We have 4 meetings this evening: the Health Committee, Grants and Community Development, Building and Planning, and Open Space and Township Properties Committees. Before we start, please silence your cell phones. Amplifying equipment is available for those having difficulty hearing during the meeting, and the room is also equipped with telecoil technology. When the floor is open for public comment, comment will first be taken from those present in the room and then from those attending virtually. Please introduce yourself before beginning your comments. And with that, I will turn things over to the Chair of the Health Committee, Commissioner Dr. Rossman.
Thank you. Reappointment and appointments to the Health Advisory Council. We have a motion on the floor to recommend to the Board of Commissioners the reappointment of Michael Brofman to the Health Advisory Council for a 4-year term. Such term to expire September 2028. The appointment of Kara Freeman as a member of the Health Advisory Council for a 4-year term. Such term to expire October 28th, 2028. And the appointments of Michael Harhay and Robin Davison as alternates to the Health Advisory Council. Do I have a second? Commissioner Gavin? I'd like to open it up to the floor for any public comment. Seeing no public comment, do we have anybody on Zoom?
No, no one is on Zoom right now.
Okay. Any questions or comments from the committee or from the board? Yes, Commissioner Freeman.
I just wanted to say that I worked very closely with Michael Brafman for 2 years when I chaired the Health Committee during the pandemic, and he is an extraordinary resource for the Health Advisory Council, and I fully support his reappointment.
Any other comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have the honor and privilege of chairing our ad hoc nominations committee, and was able to sit in on the interviews of these candidates and others, and we had a plethora of incredible candidates. This was probably the hardest decision that we had to make of all the appointments. So just want to thank everyone who applied for this role, and for those who we did not choose this time, it wasn't out of a lack of ability or anything like that. It was a lack of space that we have on our advisory boards, and hope that you continue staying interested in being involved with the township and continue to apply for roles, and hopefully next time we will have more spaces and ability to add more people. So thank you.
I'd like to thank Commissioner Whalen, Commissioner Gavin, and Commissioner Stevenson, who did an outstanding job considering how many people applied. We have to stand proud, or sit proud, that we have these type of people applying for the Health Advisory Council. So I would like to call for a vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Anybody in abstention? It passed unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Rossman. I now turn to the Grants and Community Development Committee Chair, Commissioner Epstein.
Thank you. There are 3 items on the agenda this evening. So first, I would like to make a motion to recommend to the Board of Commissioners authorizing execution of an anchor building program loan repayment agreement with Bala 202 LP to facilitate the rehabilitation of 202 Bala Avenue, a Class 2 historic resource, and the associated construction of a mixed-use building with the ground floor commercial space along Bala Avenue. Do I have a second? Thank you, Commissioner Whalen. And Jillian is here to give us an explanation.
Yes, I'm happy to talk a little bit about the building anchor loan program the township has. And I do want to just acknowledge the work that Commissioner Zeloff, he is not here, but the work that he did in 2006 to put this program into place with Bryn Mawr Theater. The Bryn Mawr Theater use of these funds was a very successful project for both the township and for Bryn Mawr specifically, and we're hopeful that this project also will see the benefits that Bryn Mawr has seen with the application of the program. Staff is recommending that, and I'm going to just share my screen to make sure everybody can be familiar with the project. As many commissioners may be aware, there was a project that was approved in 2018 in Bala Kinwood on Bala Avenue, which is the small commercial corridor that serves Bala Kinwood. The project that was approved did not advance. However, there was demolition done on the site. The prior owner was not able to facilitate advancing the project. And in June 2024, the property was in receivership with the bank, and the current property owner, which is Bala 202 LP, became the owner of the property, and they're pursuing the construction of the previously approved project with some minor modifications to bring it into conformance with the current zoning code. With that project, they have requested access to these funds. Staff is supportive as this meets the intent and the criteria of the building loan program. We're recommending that the Board of Commissioners enter into that agreement. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. Okay, so first I'll open the floor to public comment. Seeing none. Anyone on? Nope. Okay. Oh,
and I would say that the applicant of Core Development is here if there's any questions or if there's any need for additional information.
if you want to make a comment.
Yeah,
Yeah, sorry.
Good evening, Pete Stas with Core Development. We'll make it quick because of the Phillies game, but so I just wanted to comment, first of all, I appreciate being considered for this loan grant. As you're all familiar, or most of you should be, we developed 65 Cricket, and we started that process maybe 8-some years ago and have been operating the building for 4 years now. And I think it's just one of the things that this grant loan provides is renovating that historic resource, which is a corner on Bala Avenue. We always think corners make streets, and also what makes an interesting commercial avenue is historic buildings. So bringing this building back to life, we also are, we've set the new construction building back some to create a very interesting plaza, which will create very active pedestrian use. So I think it's really a shot in the arm for Bala Avenue and the incubator it needs to really make that a thriving commercial district, which it once was. The last thing I do want to say is building all this is important, but operating is even more important. And a lot of the things that we do, and we've done it at Cricket, and we're very active with doing this, is we operate these buildings ourselves, and we bring the community into the building. We have events in the building for our tenants, for the community, and our tenants want to be part of the community. So this has an opportunity because of this really cool building on the corner and the active space we have in the front, so we can tie in with other retailers on the street, activate that space, which is half the battle. Its building is very hard to do, but operating it and being active with it is very important to creating a community. So we're very excited about the project. I would also say that this, as you're probably aware, there's a number of projects on hold right now in Lower Merion, and it's a very difficult time to build your capital stack. And what this grant does is helps lower our cost of funds so that we potentially can attract the capital stack we need to build the building. So it is, although it may be small relative to the total size of the project, it has a significant effect on our capital stack. So it's very important to us on moving this project forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I was rushing everyone. Anything else?
Any questions?
Hi.
Hi.
I do have a question. My view about this grant has always been that the ideal use for it would be for a nonprofit as opposed to a commercial venture. And while I completely support what you're doing, and I'm thrilled and delighted that you're going to do this, especially to renovate the historic building on the corner, I was wondering if it would be acceptable to have a 5-year payback so that perhaps the funds could then be used for another project in the area.
Yeah.
Yeah, can I just pause for a second? I don't know if that's necessarily a question like he can answer right now. That feels a little bit,
Well,
yeah.
we can see if you can answer it.
Okay. I don't know, Ernie, if that's something that you can speak to, or is that something?
But it really does come down to a question as to whether Mr. Stas would accept a shorter timeframe.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, the 7 years would be appreciated, but if 5 is what you're requesting, I would take that rather than not get the loan. We would go through construction financing, then ultimately we would look to pay this back once we refinance the building at some point in the future. So it's a 3 to 5 year project to eventually build it and stabilize it. So the 7 years would be appreciated, but I think we can accept the 5 if you're moved to do that.
So now are there any questions or comments from the committee? I was thinking about that. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Yeah.
I'd just like to hear staff's reaction to that request. And, for initially,
Sure.
I'd just like to hear whether, is this something that would be better fleshed out offline?
I believe historically, I think the first distribution of the loan was 10 years. And then it was further extended 7 years. We ended up going with 7, suggesting 7, with the agreement based on that last disbursement or that extension, the last extension. One of the things we thought that 7 years gave them the ability to construct and then stabilize the building. One of the things we know, especially within this commercial district, is that there is, it is not a commercial district that has a solid retail base and a solid commercial base, and that's something that we're hoping to really get out of this project, to kind of serve as that catalyst. So, and I will also say, this is funding that has limited applicability because of the criteria of really an anchor building, a historic building in our commercial districts. So I do think that it is not every, it's not every year we come across a project that really fits this, these categories. So yeah, that was some of our thinking when we identified the agreement
you.
terms.
Can I just, because of the, because this is new information right here, right now, I do understand Commissioner Kramer's intent here, but I would just propose that maybe we leave it as is at the moment, vote on the proposal as it is, and then have staff revisit with the applicant offline and come back if necessary.
Well, we could do
as a
this
point
offline.
of order.
Back out for next week before the board meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Right, so you would, right, because I was going to say, we have to approve something.
Right.
Right, so either it would be 5 years or 7 years, and Jillian, and excuse me, Commissioner Racine, for cutting in, but correct me if I'm wrong. The only difference between 5 and 7 is not really the economics, because that's de minimis. It would provide us the $500,000 to loan yet to another project, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And we've been holding on to this money for how long?
Since 2021.
Since 2021, all right. So it's been a while till we found anything. So the question really would be like, is there something on the horizon? I mean, so like, for example, I couldn't recommend the Ballot Theater since I, mentioned them. That would be a clear conflict of interest, so I won't say it. But, but we really don't have anything else that's, we've been staring at, correct?
No.
Okay, all right. So if people are okay waiting, to do that as long as it comes back for next week to flush that out, that I guess would be an appropriate way to handle it. Thank you very much, and I apologize for interrupting.
Commissioner Stevenson?
Thank you.
Madam Chair. I would say that I have seen some of the work that the developer's done and working with the community, and I think that we should look at the 7, and then if there's opportunities for conversations between the staff, that's fine. And I also feel like if the developer is able to independently work to figure out a way to expedite it, we should do that. But I don't want to lose the opportunity over those pieces.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Rossman.
Well, I'm passionate about this project. Passionate because I live within a half a mile of a blighted area, and that's Ballard Avenue. This will bring growth, renewal, and a refreshing feeling just to see work being done in this hole in the wall, as the neighbors have called it. People, they go out of the way not to go down Ballard Avenue. This is a company that's proven himself in Ardmore. They're respected by the businesses surrounding them. They have an affinity towards them, and they seem to cooperate nicely and seem to be friendly. It's a $34 million capital improvement of our township, and I think that's significant. These funds can be used for historic buildings, such as the one on the corner, so we're within the guidelines. They're running into all sorts of little problems. You know, you dig a hole and you find out, oh, there's a sewer pipe. You didn't realize there was a sewer pipe. And the sewer pipe is attached to 4 different homes in that area. Then they have to go, well, we're going to dig up your lawn and negotiate the person, make sure the grass seed is put down to replace, what's missing, and then replumb everything. They don't know what else they're going to find. So I think this gives them a good kickstart to get things going. It's hard to put things in writing and say, if you can pay us back early, it'd be nice to do it. But I think it's an honorable company, and they've proven themselves to this township. So I'm all for this and begging for it as much as I will.
Got
okay,
it.
Thanks.
Okay, and I will say, as the motion was made, I did not have an issue with the 7 years. I would like us to vote on it as is. That's what I'm putting on the floor. So any other comments or questions? Yes.
One other comment, and Chris, thank you for, you had said, the offer to go talk to the applicant. One thing we do as a board, we often send staff back to do things that are already kind of done deals. And I know you were very busy. We're looking at new positions in your department. I don't think we should be doing, I think we've heard across the board that 7 years makes sense. I personally don't think we should be going back and having staff have conversations that have already been had and been done. So while I appreciate the offer, my personal opinion is if we vote on it and support it, we should move on and vote on it and support it.
Mm-hmm.
So, thank you.
Thank you. And any last comments, questions? All right, I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Oh, okay, passed unanimously. Thank you.
I want to thank all of you. Thank you.
Okay. Second item, I'm making a motion to recommend to the Board of Commissioners adoption of a resolution authorizing the township to submit a grant application to the Pennsylvania Department of Community and Economic Development's Main Street Matters Program for improvements to Cricket Terrace. Do I have a second? Thank you, Commissioner Woodring. And Jillian, thank you for the explanation you're about to give.
Yes, so I'm going to speak to both grant applications because they are requesting funds for the same improvements, similar to same improvements. So throughout the, let me just maximize this. Throughout the design process that we carried out as a recommendation of the 2023 Ardmore Master Plan, looking at creating a civic space, there were a number of comments and opportunities to look at pedestrian and circulation improvements surrounding the Shuffle Plaza area, including along Cricket Terrace. And that included a road diet of Cricket Terrace, narrowing the roadway to provide traffic calming, expanding the parking lot, Lot 5, which is growing by 10 spaces, and including some pedestrian comforts, crosswalks, as well as trees, stormwater management, BMPs. All of these elements contributed to a more comfortable and appropriate experience along this important corridor that really connects our commercial district to our very useful garage that we want to highlight. So both grant applications are seeking funding for those improvements.
Sean, can I just ask you to just clarify, because of some comments we received, this grant application approval, does this tie us to the Chauvel Plaza plans that we saw?
It does not.
Thank you. Okay. Now I'd like to open the floor for public comment. Anyone in the room? Anyone on Zoom? Okay. Do we have any questions or comments from the committee? Well, I'm going to make one. So the plans we saw were wonderful, and we had great participation. I think it was like 2 hours of comment, which was wonderful. And there was both sides. But what I heard, and I think what we all heard, was that there really is a need to address Cricket Terrace and that area and the road diet and the safety, regardless of the details of the furniture and the plantings and things that might come. I think we can all agree that the residents would appreciate this. It would be great for the township. Any other comments or questions? All right. Wonderful. Let's call the vote. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Okay, I'm just checking. All right, that's unanimous. Okay. Thank you. And then the second part of that, the last item, making a motion to recommend to the Board of Commissioners adoption of a resolution authorizing the township to submit a grant application to the Commonwealth Financing Authority's local share account statewide program for improvements to Cricket Terrace. Do I have a second? Thank you, Commissioner Woodring. Julian, I think you already spoke to this. Was there anything you'd like to add?
No, there's nothing
Okay.
I would like to add, but I'm happy to answer any
Yeah,
questions.
thank you. Do we have any public comment? Guessing no. Any comment from the committee? Questions? Wonderful. Then let's go ahead and all those in favor, if you could raise your hands. And that passes unanimously. Thank you so much, Julian.
Thank you.
And that concludes the business of Grants Community Development.
Thank you, Commissioner Epstein. Our next committee is the Building and Planning Committee, and I recognize its Vice Chair, Commissioner Whalen.
You're going to be sad that you did that, but thank you very much. We have a very short 10-item agenda, so anyone who's hoping to see some Phillies, you're out of luck. All right, the first item on our agenda for this evening is the authorization to execute the Arnold Field Settlement Agreement. So I will kick us off by making a motion to recommend to the Board of Commissioners authorization to execute a settlement agreement between the Township of Lower Merion, Lower Merion Township Zoning Hearing Board, the Lower Merion School District, the Wynwood Civic Association, and Malcolm Davidow regarding construction of recreational lighting on Arnold Field. Do I have a second? Thank you, Commissioner Courtney. I'm calling on you, Chris. Ernie?
Chris.
This has been in the works for several years. This is, I'm happy to finally get to this stage where the township is entering into settlement of litigation concerning fields on, lights on Arnold Field. This has been a challenge for both the township and the school district and the zoning hearing board and the Wynwood Civic Association for several years. The school district has reached a resolution that's acceptable to all parties. Essentially, when this first came forward, the concern was, if we're familiar with Arnold Field, that there's an existing field in Arnold Field. That field is as far from the parking lots on the main campus as any facility on Lower Merion High School. And there was concern that if there were evening events associated with lighting, people would naturally park in the neighborhood as opposed to parking on the school campus. It would be potentially disruptive to the surrounding residents. There was a lot of different give and take, and finally the school district has decided as a compromise to relocate a field. Keep the field where they have there now, that works fine, it's a multi-use field, and to build a completely new field that would be where the lights would go. They've also agreed to certain terms of how many events could take place, making sure that the parking was accessible, to really reduce any of the externalities that were associated with this. It's certainly, these all make sense to staff. One of the things that we were also concerned about was when this originally came forward, it was first proposed somewhere about 10 years ago when Lower Marion High School was being redeveloped. And there was a condition attached to that redevelopment that if lighting ever came forward with the fields, it would need to come back. Ordinarily, lighting wouldn't require land development. But in this case, there was, and it actually went through the process the right way, so the community was involved. We actually worked to get the field in the right location and to reach all those resolutions. Staff has reviewed the plans, and we reviewed it like it was a land development. Not formally, as didn't go through the process, but it meets all of those requirements. One of the things that you would normally get with a land development, for instance, is screening and buffering. This meets all the screening and buffering, exceeds the screening and buffering of township codes if it had gone through that process. Another instance that would be sidewalks and pedestrian connectivity. There is a provision in the settlement that a sidewalk would be constructed on Church Road, or a sidewalk or a pedestrian pathway, if and when the township makes a connection. There's a property on Kent Road that doesn't have a sidewalk. So when that connection comes forward, the school district would be obligated to put that sidewalk in. It just seems to make sense. It's moving forward. We've really heard, since it's gone forward, very little public comment, if anything. If anything, people have said it's about time to move this forward. We feel that it's in the township's best interest, and we recommend entering into that settlement.
Thank you very much, Chris. Any questions or comments from the public? Please come up, introduce yourself, and kindly use the lectern on the right-hand side of the room. Sorry, sir, you're going to have to use the lectern on that side.
All right.
Maybe I just meant the correct.
Good evening. I'm Tony Lane, the president of the Wynwood Civic Association. This December will mark 5 years since the school district first attempted to put lights on the existing field at Arnold Field. We had to raise $200,000 to pay legal fees to fight this battle. And probably the only reason that we prevailed was because of change in leadership in the administration and the board at the school district. And finally, people who recognized that they were part of a community and needed to work with a community got involved with us. And it really wasn't that hard to work this out once that happened. It's just very, very unfortunate that it started out the way it did. Anyway, I want to personally thank Chris Leswing because he was really the moving party in putting forward the plan to put the lights on the field that is closest to Montgomery Avenue, where it belongs, as far away from residents as possible. So we worked hard to get this agreement. I think it's good for everyone. We never opposed lights on Arnold Field per se. We just didn't feel it was appropriate to have them right on top of a 100-year-old neighborhood. So with that said, I'm asking you to please approve this so we can put this to bed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Seeing none. Jody, do we have anybody on Zoom?
There are no attendees on Zoom.
Fair enough.
No.
Any commissioners have comment or questions? Mr. Burnham.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Lamb. And Mr. Lamb, thanks to all of your work and many members of the Civic Association, and certainly your shout out to Chris Leswing is well deserved. Over that 5-year period, I know there are a number of people on this board that sat at a number of conference tables trying to work this out, myself included. But I think also a lot of credit goes to Commissioner Courtney and Commissioner Gavin, who are here, tonight, who spent countless hours, 5 years plus, working through to try to reconcile everybody's considerations, for this. On a number of levels, people can say it's unfortunate that sometime it took some of the turns that it did, or the costs that you all incurred. Not looking to cast aspersions at anybody, or with hindsight go 20/20 and say what could have been done differently. But at the end of the day, we have a result here reflected by this agreement, which I think indeed covers everyone's concerns. Maybe there's a learning curve of how we got there for the future, but it is truly a credit to a lot of work and effort from folks, especially the two colleagues that I mentioned on my right and my left, and wholeheartedly support this. And Chris, thank you very much. Thank you, Commissioner Whalen.
Thank you, Commissioner Bernheim. Commissioner Courtney.
Thank you, Commissioner Whalen, and thank you, Commissioner Bernheim. I'm going to echo a lot of what you said. Mr. Lame, President of the Wingwood Civic Association, mentioned that this has been going on for 5 years. Based on some of the history I've gathered, this is an issue that's divided our community for at least a decade. It just was dormant for a bit. There has at times been a contentious relationship between the neighbors and the Civic Association on one side and the school district on the other. And what we have here tonight is a testament to compromise, a testament to hard work, many hours and sacrifice on both of those sides. And it was costly to get here, but this agreement saves us from even more further costly litigation. And on the positive side, this is an investment in our township. It's an investment in improvement to school facilities. It's an additional athletic field. It will be additional hours. It's not just an improvement for our student athletes, but it's also an improvement for the neighborhood. There will be increased protections for the neighbors of Arnold Field as part of this. I give all credit to the Wingwood Civic Association and the neighbors, to the school boards past and present that worked on this, and to the school district administration, as well as to my colleagues that Commissioner Bernheim just mentioned. I look forward to this improved relationship and hope that this has set a path of compromise going forward on the issues that my neighborhood faces with regard to the high school. And I am excited that we can put this particular issue behind us and the community can move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Courtney. Anyone else? Seeing none, I will calls for a vote. All those in favor, say, raise your hand. It is unanimous. No abstentions, no objection. All right, one down. On to the second item for this evening. Authorization to advertise ordinances, Chapter 105, Noise and Exterior Lighting, and Chapter 155, Zoning Lighting Amendments. So I'm going to, again, get us started by making a motion for the recommendation to the Board of Commissioners authorizing the Township Secretary to advertise a public hearing and notice of intent to adopt the following. First, an ordinance to amend the Code of the Township of Lower Merion, Chapter 105, entitled Noise and Exterior Lighting, by entirely revising Article 3, Exterior Lighting, setting forth the purpose of the regulations, creating extensive definitions of terms related to outdoor lighting, setting forth figuratively acceptable and not acceptable shapes of outdoor lighting, establishing general regulations, requiring conformance to applicable codes, providing for applicability of the regulations, exemptions, and submission requirements, establishing illumination levels for various uses, establishing glare ratings, total site lumen allowances, and curfew times, regulating recreational and sports lighting, providing for special permitting, and setting forth enforcement regulations. And second, an ordinance to amend the Code of the Township of Lower Merion, Chapter 155, entitled Zoning, Article 2, Definitions, Section 155-2.1, Definitions, to create definitions for athletic field, recreational and sports lighting, and recreational and sports lighting event, and Article 3, General to Districts, and Article 5, Uses, to effectively regulate recreational and sports lighting by special exception in the institutional education, i.e. district. Anyone who wants to give me a second does not have to read the entire thing back. Thank you, Commissioner Kramer. All right, go ahead, Chris.
Great. I am not going to go through this ordinance line by line because we've presented this ordinance several times in a very detailed memo in the ordinance before you. I will say that I'm rather proud of this ordinance and the process that the township goes through. This started several years ago, and it was put on hold while the litigation for Arnold Field was being resolved. There were some things that could affect that litigation. The school district had reached out to the township. We accommodated them, so it's been on hold. We've been working on it. But up to that point, there had been at least 3 public meetings in this room where the lighting ordinance was discussed. In each of those versions, there was draft 1, draft 2, draft 3. Each of those versions got better. There were a lot of really great public comments that came from the board, came from the planning commission, came from civic associations. Random lighting engineers who work in the township contributed as well. And each time that ordinance got better. And what you have tonight, and it is a very transparent process of how legislation should be made in the community and to listen to people. And so with the lighting ordinance, I'm just going to take you through just a brief summary of what it has and how, but that's how we got here. Once again, this is not the zoning code, this is the lighting ordinance. It's chapter 105, and chapter 105 is noise and lighting. Last year, we updated the noise ordinance, now we're updating the lighting ordinance. This is on heels of updating the zoning code and the subdivision code. So we're really working our way to modernize all of our land use and nuisance codes. Prior to this, the township's lighting ordinance was 1 page, and it hadn't been updated in years. And it was really concerned about just the spill of residential light at the property line. And it had 1 standard, and it just wasn't adequate for what we're trying to do as a community when we talk about sustainability or the aesthetics, wildlife and health. This is a modern ordinance that's based on, a model ordinance that was developed by lighting professionals that deals with dark sky, and this is something I think the board hears repeatedly when we're talking about new development. There will be no uplighting in the township. We will have dark skies after this. Light trespass significantly reduced at the property line. There are curfews on things that are like commercial signage at night that needs to get turned off at certain hours in certain areas, just to really keep the character of the township going forward. This is a much more sustainable ordinance going forward. Let's see, let's get to it. It really helps residential uses going through it. And while we had this period of time, our process really did work, because during that time we were able to get some very specific things that came in that we didn't realize. And a good example of this is over by City Avenue, there's some homes that are fairly tight, LDR4, that have security lighting, right? And they have these floodlights. And we were able to actually customize how those floodlights could be accommodated into the spirit of this ordinance. That we wouldn't have just done with the model ordinance. The model ordinance didn't anticipate that. This allowed those kind of issues to be brought to us and to be able to address them and incorporate them into it. We have great submission requirements. It's much easier to do. We recommend adopting the lighting ordinance. We think it's ready to go. But I'm happy to answer any of your questions about any specifics.
Thank you very much. First, we'll go to any public comment.
My name is Carl Watson. This is a very comprehensive lighting ordinance. I would be the first one to say in the 30-some pages of it, it's probably not perfect. And we'll find out, as we do with most ordinances the township passes, that whatever things we didn't get right the first time, it'll get refined. But this is it's very comprehensive, and it's fairly complete. I say that with the experience of being the township's lighting consultant for more than 15 years and for more than 30 years being in the specifying consulting engineer field of lighting, and probably 50 years or more doing something with lighting design and application. In any event, what's important is I did, and confirmed it again today with Chris Leswing, that there was a error of omission. There is a definition in this document, which is on page 70 of your handout, and the first entry there is called Sequence of Operation, and it describes that it's a document that's added to the end of the drawing set specifying the functionality, that's the operation and everything, of the lighting control system. That's a great definition, except it should have been in one of the requirements that this be part of a submission. And on page, let me get the right page. Yeah, here we are. Starting on page 74, they have submission requirements, and page 75, at the top of that page, it's parenthesis 2, major lighting submission. On major lighting projects, the townships should be getting a sequence of operation. By the way, that term is a term of art in the lighting industry. It's very specific, it's very clear, it defines things, it's well used. Everyone knows what it means if you're a lighting professional. In any event, I'm suggesting that it be added to the list of requirements that starts on page 75 for major lighting submissions and goes on through page 70, all the way through the middle of page 76. I think it belongs probably either bracket 5 or bracket 6, somewhere in there. Could even be added at the end. Bracket 10, the last item is bracket 9. But it should be in there as a requirement to submit the sequence of operation. This is important when you have a complex site. Let's just take the example we just heard about field lighting for sports. You might have high mast lighting, you might have pedestrian scale lighting, and you might have bollards on a walkway or a sidewalk. And those things don't always just turn on and turn off. Sometimes they turn on and they dim. Sometimes they turn on, dim, and they come to full bright when they detect motion. There's lots of other things in the lighting control world. So in any event, if you have the sequence of operations submitted, it gives Chris's staff the ability to further evaluate the functionality and the feasibility and the reasonableness of what is being submitted. On some of these larger projects, this is very appropriate. So that's the only, believe it or not, and I've had a lot of input to this document, and others have. It's been helped by the consultant the township now employs, who's added some things, and it's, as I said, it's very comprehensive. If that one item of sequence of operation is added, I think we have a very, very good document. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. Any other public comment on this item? Seeing none. Jody, I still assume there's nobody on Zoom. All right. Any commissioner question or comments? Mr. Gavin?
A question for Chris Lessling. What do you think? Do you agree that that should be added as number 10?
Carl brought that to my attention this afternoon. I didn't have time to prepare an amendment, but I think it's an easy fix to make a new number 10 and require a sequence of operations.
Okay. Can I make a friendly amendment to
You
add
can.
that? All right.
I will accept it as friendly. Commissioner Kramer, you accept it? All right. Done. Anything further? Mr. Gavin, you done?
I'm done.
Any other commissioners have any questions or comments? Chris, did you want to?
We don't have anything else to say. We're just hoping you'll advertise the ordinance.
All right.
So that would be Chapter 105. There's two ordinances. I can go through both if you like. We're doing two ordinances tonight. One is Chapter 105 with just a lighting ordinance, and then I have some amendments to Chapter 155 that deal just with sports and recreational lighting. There's actually two actions.
Okay. Thank you. All right.
As a point of order, should we vote for the one that's on the table now?
Yes. That's what we're doing. So we are voting, unless Commissioner Bernheim wants to repeat it, we are going to vote for only the first ordinance that I referenced as amended just now. Does anyone have any questions on that? Or, all right. So point of order, thank you. And raise your hand to signify aye. It is unanimous. No nays, no abstentions. We don't have any commissioners online, right?
No.
Okay. So secondly, Chris, will you go to number 2?
So moving along, one of the major issues is brought forward with the lighting ordinance when it first came forward. The lighting ordinance got muddled with the Arnold Field litigation, and there was attempts and interest to try to put issues relating to use of fields as opposed to just the lighting of fields. So the lighting ordinance actually includes standards for recreational fields, right? The spillage of light. But the real issue with recreational sports lighting is not necessarily the light itself. We control the light trespass, but these are larger events that take place sometimes after hours on institutional campuses, and there's concern about the externalities of these large events. So what we've did at the direction of the Building and Planning Committee is staff went out and created a separate ordinance as a use of recreational and sports lighting for large events over 100 attendees. This would address some of those concerns. And what we're recommending is permitting sports, recreational sports lighting by special exception. It would go through a process, and there's specific criteria, and I'll take you through that. That addresses those concerns that led to the litigation of externalities and making sure that the facility itself was able to accommodate this sort of additional use. So in that, in Chapter 155, we'll be looking at adding some definitions for athletic field and recreational and sports lighting, cleaning up something from our zoning code called the ambient standards. This was something that was put into our code, and we found that they were objective. And what we're replacing them with in this code are subjective or objective standards, not subjective standards. The ambient standards were too hard. They were open to interpretation as opposed to saying this is what something must be. So we're removing those and then including the special exception criteria. So let me just take you through what those are. We're adding 3 new definitions, one for what is an athletic field, what is recreational and sports lighting, and then what is a recreational and sports lighting event. And that is an event that has more than 100 participants. So we're not trying to regulate just in the evening practices, smaller events. This is something where you're drawing people, and it would require a little bit of additional attention. Removing these ambient standards in Section 155 3.1, they are now obsolete with the adoption of the new lighting code, because the lighting code has specific standards relating to these very issues, and they're not open as much to interpretation. And then going to the section of uses in the zoning code and creating a new use for recreational sports lighting by special exception only in the IE district. This is the district that relates to institutional educational uses, or schools, commonly referred to. So the first piece is to clean up the, there's one table in here, and our new zoning code has a series of tables, and it's very well organized, but one of the things that we first have to do is amend the table for cultural and recreational accessory uses in removing the exception or creating an exception for sports and recreational lighting as opposed to others. There's a curfew on those, that accessory uses are limited between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m., except if it's permitted by special exception in what's coming to come forward. And then establishing sports and recreational lighting as a special exception in the IE district. And in this, there's very specific standards. So one of the concerns that we've heard from the community and residents who live near institutions is the commercialization of institutional properties and the use by third parties that would increase the intensity for people who are living by these. So one of the things that we've decided and we're proposing is requiring these to be a school-sponsored athletic event. So these aren't going to be, a soccer club can't come and do this, or somebody from outside of the township can't come and do this. These are really accessory to the primary use of that institution. So it's a school-sponsored athletic sporting event such as football, soccer, field hockey, where some of the participants are enrolled at the school, university, or college where the lights are located. So it would be an event associated with that, the host institution. It could also be a championship game, a playoff game, a school-sponsored graduation or assembly event. These are things just associated with that institution. And then also field practices. And it establishes specific standards for the recreational and sports lighting within the district. It defines the location of poles. And this was one of the things that is concerned, because poles associated with sports lighting need to be taller. One of the things about sports lighting is you need to cover a larger area. And it sounds counterintuitive, but the taller the pole, the less poles you need and the less light spillage. But the location of those poles is very significant and have an impact upon surrounding residents. And most of our institutions are bordered by residents. So what we're trying to do is strike that balance. So what we're proposing is that the poles can be within 100 feet of a residential district if you have a 40-foot buffer, right? You have to have a lot of thickness between. You can be closer. But the further you get away the field, so if they go to 200 feet, you can reduce the buffer to 30 feet. And if you go to 300 feet, you can reduce the buffer to 10 feet. Kind of a wedding cake approach. To try to do this. But we know that many of our schools are where the schools are. They're located, they have neighbors by them, their fields are fairly well set, but we've looked at this and wanted to be able to make sure that if it was going to go forward with the schools, they needed to do that. And then we also added some other specific criteria that demonstrate that within 600 feet of the event, that there's adequate parking. This avoids the issue of people parking in a neighborhood for an event in the evening, that the school itself can host it. So we thought that 600 feet is a reasonable walking distance for this. We measured many of the schools. We did a lot of analysis. Colleen Hall's here with me today. Colleen Hall looked at every single school that this could apply to and looked at where the parking was, what schools could be available, and you have that in your packet. That's a series of those graphics that are in your packet. We're also making sure that the parking can be accessed from a primary, secondary, or tertiary road. Our institutions primarily were approved by a special exception over the years, and they were all required to be on a primary, secondary, or tertiary road. These are the roads where most people drive down, and if you're talking about an event, you want people to access from one of these major roads, not cutting through a neighborhood. Neighborhood roads are minor roads. We're requiring the access to these events to be coming from primary, secondary, or tertiary roads. And then we're also limiting the height of the poles to 80 feet total. We brought this to the Planning Commission last week. The Planning Commission had a couple of good comments. We wanted to pass those forward. One is in the criteria for special exceptions, we have very general criteria. One of the planning commissioners mentioned that many of our schools have historic resources. What would be the impact upon historic resources? I think we could have drawn by inference, saying, well, yes, it's a criteria, what is the impact? He recommended that we add a provision that if a property is located on the historic inventory, that one of the criteria is that they need to demonstrate that the poles and/or improvements don't negatively impact the historic resources. It's a great idea. It's clarity. We approve of that. We think it's a great idea. And then the Planning Commission also recommended consider whether lights for non-events such as athletic practices should be limited to certain hours of the days of the week. They didn't really recommend time or hours. We just wanted to bring that to your attention. From a staff standpoint, we didn't see that necessary. We think it's fairly self-regulating. But if it certainly becomes an issue, it's one of those things we can come back and revisit. And I think we will be revisiting some of these things in the future as it goes through the process. I've had some comments. There's nothing we're ready to bring forward this evening, but I think after the first of the year, we might be bringing back some cleanups to this as we come forward. And then we also would recommend adding the following language to item 8 on table 5.3, reference compliance with section 105.14, recreational and sports lighting. That makes sure that these new standards in zoning code reference back to the lighting code that we're just adopting as well. I know that was a lot. I'm happy to answer any questions.
First, let's go to any public comment on this ordinance. Seeing none. Any commissioner comment or question on this ordinance? Commissioner Gabbard.
So, Chris, I had a question. You had talked about this being for fields where you have big events, right? 100+ events. We're talking about permanent light structures. So if you have a field that has they're going to play one big event or do one graduation a year, but you have practices the rest of the year. How do you kind of balance that out between the big events and the normal use of small events?
Correct. Now, most of those fields in the township aren't lit.
Right.
So if you were having a one-off, the lighting code actually for sports and rec has a provision for special events, for a special permit for these type of events. What we haven't done is built that into this, and I think that was one of the things I was referencing. I think we should come back and look at that after the first of the year or in the next cycle of code amendments for those one-off specifications. We tried to, this was brought to our attention in the last couple of days, and we're juggling it, and I hope you can appreciate, this is one of those ordinances, if you fix something for one place, it opens up problems somewhere else. And the math got to be very difficult. We'd like some time to analyze a little bit further, but we do think that we should have some flexibility for one-off events to do that. Perhaps if you're using temporary lighting and having reduced criteria. There would be a different approval process, a lighter approval process, and making sure that it's just for a limited time.
So in general, is the idea, if it's a space that's going to have big events at it, you can put in the infrastructure for those bigger events, but you will not be able to use the light, like you can't use that infrastructure for other, that infrastructure would only be used for those big events, or would it be able to be used?
No, you could use it for your daily practices and such.
Okay. All right.
So it would help if start times, and we know in the community, start times might change, there might be people working later, the lights would be available for that. That would count as an event.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Commissioner Courtney.
Thanks, Commissioner Whalen. With regard to the Planning Commission's recommendation about athletic practices, if we do nothing, they're just sort of bound by what the lighting ordinance says, right?
I'm having a little bit of tough time hearing it.
Oh, sorry. I'm referring to that one, the Planning Commission recommendation that we consider whether lights for non-events such as practices should be limited to certain hours and days. If we do nothing, it's just bound to whatever the lighting ordinance says. Is that correct?
Correct. Well, they would go to the curfew. They could potentially go. I think the concern from the Planning Commission was what would stop somebody from doing this till 10 o'clock every night of the week. I think it's self-regulating. I don't think we see that, but it's certainly something we could look at, and I think we need to better understand before we follow up on that.
Okay, so the lighting ordinance isn't like land development, like we can change it and it will apply to everyone. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay, great. Thanks.
All right. Commissioner Stevenson.
Thank you. And I apologize if this was discussed when I was out. But has your department worked with the district to talk about circumstances like playoffs and stuff like that?
Yeah, we've had numerous conversations with the school district and their attorneys, even as late as this afternoon. The ideas of this for that would allow a certain number of events when you have playoffs, and if somebody's coming up with a playoff and it goes to overtime, it's all that would be accommodated in this.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other commissioners? Seeing none, I will go ahead and call it for a vote. All those in favor, raise your hand signifying aye. It passes unanimously. No abstentions, no opposition.
Point of order, Commissioner Whalen. I think we skipped one minor step. Before voting, we need to have a motion and a second. So we did it for the first one. I'm not sure we did it for the second.
So fair point. However, I did make, just to clarify, my original motion, which was seconded by Commissioner Kramer, was actually effective as to both. And then we voted originally just as to the first ordinance. And this
So
time
this
we
would have
voted-
been the remaining part of that which was not voted for?
Correct. Okay. Are any commissioners confused as to what we just voted on? I'm happy to.
Just want to make sure we actually had something officially on the floor for it. All right.
The original motion was both,
Right.
and then when they were making the amendment, you guys decided to vote on just that portion.
So
of
we
the amendment.
unofficially severed it. Okay.
This
All
was
right.
the vote.
We're
on
good.
the remaining.
All right.
Thank you very
And
much.
included Chris's amendments.
Yes. All right, so moving on. Our next item is authorization to release funds held in escrow. So I'm going to make a motion to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval to release funds held in escrow as improvement guarantees in accordance with Section 135-7 of the Township Code for the following: 601, 609, 615, and 620 Riders Ferry Road, Pencoid Landing, escrow release number 2 in the amount of $492,485. 762 Lancaster Avenue, Aqua addition and parking lot improvements, escrow release number 2, final amount in the amount of $113,056. And 101 North Marion Avenue, Bryn Mawr College Wellness Center, escrow release number 5, final in the amount of $8,800. Do I have a second? Thank you, Commissioner Gavin. I don't think we need staff comment or anything with this. Are there any questions or comments from the public? Seeing none. Any questions or comments from committee members? Seeing none. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, raise your hand. Passes unanimously. We are down 1, Jody, though. So.
Yes. It took me a second to figure out who was missing. But I got it. Thank you.
All right, moving on. We are now going to deal with the waiver of Township Code, Section 111-4.2, regulating open containers for Ardmore Initiative's first Thursday holiday kickoff. Therefore, I'm going to make a motion to the Board of Commissioners for approval of a waiver of Township Code Section 111-4.2 as requested by applicant Ardmore Initiative to permit patrons to possess open containers with alcoholic beverages and to serve alcoholic beverages in public rights of way within a regulated area in Schaffel Plaza and a portion of Lot 6 on Thursday, December 5th, 2024, between the hours of 5 p.m. and 8 p.m., subject to Ardmore Initiative providing the required insurance certificate documenting adequate coverage as required by the township. Do I have a second? Thank you, Commissioner Epstein. Any comments or questions from the public? Seeing none. Any questions or comments from any committee members? Mr. Gavin.
So we received public comment via email that said a couple things. One was, why do we keep doing this one after another when we have so many events? I think it makes total sense to do this. Rather than opening it up, it allows us to make sure that the events are something that makes sense, and to me this absolutely makes sense. One question that did come up in the public comment that I had a question on was, this event, I guess last year or a recent event, had a lot of non-local vendors there. And Jillian, wanted to get your take on that, and is there an opportunity to limit this to local vendors? Because it should be, when we're doing events done by the Ardmore Initiative to support Ardmore in the heart of our town, to the extent possible, we should certainly have local vendors. So wanted to get your take on that.
Yeah, so my understanding, and Nancy Scarlato from the Ardmore Initiative is here and can speak to this as well, but that vendor spaces are made available for all participating businesses within the boundary of Ardmore Initiative. There are, after those spaces, if there are additional spaces available, those are for other vendors. We do think it's a good thing for other people who may want to get experience in Ardmore, maybe someone who doesn't have the means to have a brick and mortar, to be able to come and be a vendor in some of these weekend events is a great opportunity. This is a comment we've received before, and Nancy has provided a list of the vendors at previous events. And that will be distributed to the board from the Fall for Ardmore event.
Okay. But just to be clear, so priority is given to vendors within the township, and only after there are extra spaces, then it's allowed outside of the township?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
And I would also say that sometimes there's a conflict of timing and scheduling for staff to have a space open within the district and also be manning a vendor spot at some of these events. So those are some of the logistics to take into consideration.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had.
Thank you. All right, any other committee members? Seeing none, I will call it for a vote. All those in favor, raise your hand signifying aye. All right, any abstentions? One difficult person and no opposition. So that was just almost unanimous, one difficulty, no opposition.
So it's actually unanimous because she abstained and everybody else voted in favor?
I know, I just want to point out that she's being difficult. Thank you for the point of order. All right, moving on as quickly as possible. I think we're probably only halfway through the Phillies game if everyone wants to get out.
1-0 in favor of Phillies game.
That is an excellent point of order. All right, next agenda item is the resolution for the approval of conditional use application at 1650 to 1660 Mount Pleasant Road, Villanova, Ward 6. I'm going to get us started with a motion to move to the Board of move for the recommendation of approval by the Board of Commissioners adoption of a resolution for conditional use application. The applicant seeks conditional use approval to not subdivide under the open space overlay district requirements set forth in zoning code section 155-7.2b and to create a narrow or irregular lot set forth in zoning code section 155-3.13. Do I have a second? Thank you, Commissioner Gavin. Go ahead, Chris.
So they're actually, I'm going to go over the next two items because they're interrelated. They both deal with the same property. And you have a subdivision plan and a conditional use hearing, conditional use order before you. It's not that complicated. It seems complicated to get here, but let me walk you through it. There's a lot of procedure that's required to get there, but the actual instance of this is a property, it's about 12 acres, it's out in Villanova, near the Blue Route, beautiful area. It's one property with 2 houses on it. It's something we just don't have in the township. It was something that was from years ago. There are 2 houses. It was a family matter, tried to keep it so that members of the same family would live on the same house. But in modern world, it becomes impractical. People who have their own house should have their own lot. And really, the people that live here have come to us and said, we're bound by this previous subdivision. Can you help us? We want to have our own lots. There will be no new subdivision out of this. There's provisions not to have any subdivision. It just makes sense. The houses won't change, the driveways won't change. It's the same plan. It's just we're allowing this to become 2 individual houses on 2 lots. In order to do that, it needs to comply with zoning, and it needs a subdivision plan. In order to comply with the subdivision plan, it needs to meet certain zoning provisions that they can't meet because it's already in place. One of them is lot frontage. That's why they're going for conditional use. And then also, this is because it's over 5 acres, it's required to meet the requirements of the township's open space preservation district. That is primarily, those standards of open space are for when you have a new development, when you're clearing an area and then you're putting in specific standards to make sure the open space is in proportion to here, here, and here. Well, this has a lot of open space on it. It just doesn't technically meet what that requirement is, but it meets it in excess. So the applicant went for conditional use, they met their criteria. You have a recommendation in front of you to approve that. And then, in order to come forward, they also have a subdivision plan, and the subdivision plan essentially puts a line right down, this pink line that's here, takes it down, and it shows where the open space areas are. They exceed what's from our ordinance, and it creates 2 new lots. One of the lots doesn't quite have the frontage required in an LDR 1 district. So they were it's technically a narrow lot, but it well exceeds the lot area for the district and all of the other provisions. There is no harm by doing this. We allow this by conditional use. It meets all the criteria. The hearing officer has recommended approval. And then also there are a couple waivers that come forward for this because it's also a little clunky, because they're going through tentative use and it's had a public process and preliminary land development. We don't see a purpose to tentative sketch. We encourage the applicant to seek a waiver of that. And we were able to, I think it all comes together. The purpose of tentative sketch is if you don't quite have it together, buy some time to figure it out. This is figured out. Also, then there's a couple technical waivers from the SALDO to not provide natural features on the preliminary subdivision plan. Nothing is really changing. That makes sense. Not to provide all conservation plan requirements. They provide a vast majority of them. Nothing's changing. Once again, there's really no reason for this. And then to not provide a sidewalk at this time, to defer that sidewalk. This is a very rural area of the township, much like we do with similar applications in this part of the township. We're not waiving that requirement. We're recommending deferring that to the time that if there is a sidewalk network, the applicant would be required to put that in. That is simply what the 2 applications are. I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right. Are there any questions or comments from the public? Okay. Mind using the other lectern? Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Whalen. Good evening, Fred Fromhold. I'm here tonight on behalf of the applicants, the owners of the property, and I appreciate all the cooperation we've received from staff. These matters are before you with recommended conditions of approval. We agreed to all of those recommended conditions. The one point I did want to mention was with respect to a sanitary sewer easement. We had been requested by staff, and it's in the recommendation of the hearing officer that a sanitary sewer easement be provided through this property should there ever in the future be a need for a connection from Mount Pleasant Road up the hill through the property for sanitary sewers. We have agreed upon that. We've agreed to that condition. We did, with the cooperation of Public Works, identify a location for that condition along the side of Lot 1, which is slightly different than the location that had been recommended to you by the hearing officer. And I think, Chris, you had language that you were going to suggest that would make it clear as to where that future sanitary sewer easement would be located. But that's my only comment. We appreciate all the cooperation we've received from staff.
Thank you very much, Mr. Frumhold. Anyone else from the public? Seeing none, assuming, Jody, we still have no one left on Zoom. Any committee members have any questions or comments? Commissioner Gildegreen.
I noticed in the packet there was a reference to the fact that in 1976 this was required to be one parcel. Does anybody know why?
I would defer that to the applicant. It's not a municipal, when it came to us, and we've been discussing this with the applicant for over a year, we've had many of this, it's not a municipal, it's not really our business. I mean, in the municipal government, we plat properties, we follow zoning, we follow subdivision code. That was something that was a deed that was put on by the previous owner. Mr. Fromhold has some of that backstory he can help you out with.
In a nutshell, no, we don't know why. We've looked at that to see whether we could find any records in the township that would require the consolidation of two lots when you have single-family dwellings on each of the lots. It would appear that that constitutes a zoning violation, that you have two houses on one lot. How all that occurred, we really don't know. We looked, we tried to figure out why, because we were asking the same question that you just asked, and we don't know why, and I don't want to belabor the point, but it does raise an awful lot of questions as to the legality of the lot, the legality of the combining the lots at the time, whether you have a zoning violation now with two houses on one lot. But the nice thing is that this subdivision cures all that and makes that really a moot point. But I appreciate the question, and I don't know the answer.
Thank you, Mr. Frumhold. Thank you. Anything else, Gil?
That's it. That was my question.
Commissioner Burnham.
Now, I was going to note that from the fine write-up that we got from our hearing officer, it says the commissioners may wish to inquire about the circumstances leading to a prior board to require consolidation, because it said that a prior board required it, of the lots into one property in 1976, given the request to subdivide the property in the pending matters. And I would agree with Mr. Frommeld's interesting question, but it really doesn't matter. The question is this an appropriate, request here or now? So maybe, somebody can dig into the archives if they're really that curious, and maybe not. But for purposes here, this seems to be an appropriate motion. But same question, crossed, I think, a lot of our minds as we read this. It was, it's 11.5 acres?
Yes.
To consolidate that into one? I don't know.
It's been there's a lot of these interesting ones that are out there. It's actually one of the more fascinating parts of the job when you come across some of these that are out there.
Okay. Well, thank you for allowing me to add that actually startling tidbit.
Thank you. Any other commissioners? Commissioner Gavin.
I want to make a comment and then a proposed amendment. So,
okay.
Comment, I had the fortune of walking the property with the owners of the property. It is a spectacular property. It is incredibly well maintained. So just thanking the residents for maintaining this beautiful property. This is a really unique circumstance, which is why, as we just heard from Chris, we're doing this. And this is exactly why we have this conditional use and it's here. So it makes complete sense, and I urge my colleagues here to support this. From an amendment standpoint, as was brought up, there are two amendments I'd like to make. One is for condition of approval number 4, which currently says a sanitary sewer easement shall be provided from the rear property lot 2 to Mount Pleasant Road, generally in the same alignment as the previously vacated right-of-way for the Morris Road extension. The easement is to be reserved for potential future extension of public sewer services. That's what it currently says. What I'd like to amend it to is a sanitary sewer easement shall be provided from the rear property lot 2, which is what it currently says. Cross out the rest of that sentence. So the easement shall be provided along the southwestern property line from Mount Pleasant Road to the Morris Avenue extension. And then the next sentence staying the same, the easement is to be reserved for potential future extension of public sewer services. This is essentially, as Mr. Fromhold said, to move where the easement is to something more appropriate as staff and the applicant had put together. So that's the first amendment I'd like to propose. Hopefully that's a friendly amendment.
I consider it a friendly amendment.
And as the seconder of the amendment, I also find it friendly. Condition of approval number 7, also about the sanitary sewer easement.
We're not there yet.
Never mind. So we'll leave it at this?
This is just the
Sorry, that's
conditional
for the-
use.
Sorry, oh,
resolution,
gotcha.
the next one.
Oh, sorry. So I will save the other amendment for later, so, right.
All right.
That's it. Thank you.
Any further questions or comments from the committee members? Seeing none, all those in favor, raise your hand saying aye. It is unanimous. As amended.
Yes.
All right, so now we are moving on to help out Commissioner Gavin here. I think I was the one who confused him, so I'll take blame for that. To the next agenda item, which is the preliminary subdivision plan for 1650 to 1660 Mount Pleasant Road, Villanova, Ward 6. So I will make a motion to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of a preliminary subdivision plan. The plan shows the subdivision of 1660 Mount Pleasant Road, an 11.5 acre parcel into 2 lots. The parcel currently contains 2 single-family detached dwelling units, which both have access from separate driveways via Mount Pleasant Road. The subdivision plan also show, Jody, for point of order, do I need to read through this entire thing?
You could
Yes.
say as, I mean, you
Yes.
should, but you could say as shown on the agenda.
As shown on the agenda. Each lot will contain separate online sewage disposal systems, and in addition, the application requires the following waivers from Township Subdivision and Land Development Code sections, which were recommended for approval by the Planning Commission. And as these were waivers, I do think it important to read them, unfortunately, each. Number 1, Section 135-3.2.A1, to not submit a tentative sketch plan. Number 2, Section 135-3.6.B, to not provide the following on the preliminary subdivision plan: location, species, and size of existing trees, location, species, and size of existing or proposed shade trees and large canopy trees, existing understory vegetation, location of trees and or vegetated areas proposed to be removed or disturbed, actual drip lines of all trees, existing fire hydrants, existing and proposed lighting, and drainage patterns. And number 3, Section 135-8.3, to not provide all the conservation plan requirements of Table 8.3.1. And finally, number 4, Section 135-4.9.f, to not provide and or defer installation of sidewalk along Mount Pleasant Road. And I will bail out Commissioner Gavin and suggest that I will also, in my motion, be amending condition of approval number 7 with regard to the subdivision plan. This is the same language that we just amended in the conditional use approval number 4, whereby we will be deleting the language to Mount Pleasant Road, comma, generally in the same alignment as the previously vacated right-of-way for the Morris Road extension, and instead replacing that with along the southwestern property line from Mount Pleasant Road to the Morris Avenue extension, as we heard from Mr. Fromhold and from Chris already. Do I have a second? Thank you, Commissioner Gavin. Anybody from the public? Seeing none. Any commissioners or committee members? Seeing none. All right, all those in favor, say aye. Raise your hand. It is unanimous. And so we move on. The next item is the approval of certificates of appropriateness. I will make a motion to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of the following certificates of appropriateness as recommended by the Historical Architectural Review Board at their meeting held on October 1st, 2024. First, 450 Booth Circle, Haverford Station, Historic District 24-19. Approval to replace a freestanding garage on this non-contributing property with a new garage with a larger footprint utilizing fiber cement siding with a smooth finish instead of vinyl, citing Secretary of the Interior Standards 9 and 10. Second, 47 East Lancaster Avenue, Ardmore Commercial Historic District 24-20. Approval to install a non-illuminated aluminum sign over 3 panes of the transom window, easy for me to say, above the restaurant entrance with a subcommittee to review modifications to the method of attachment, citing Secretary of the Interior Standards 9 and 10. And finally, number 3, 43 Cricket Avenue, Ardmore Commercial Historic District 24-18. Approval to install a sign consisting of halo-lit channel letters attached to a raceway with a subcommittee to review revised documentation, citing Secretary of the Interior Standard number 9. Before I ask for a second, are there any committee members who would want to handle one of these separately? Seeing none. In that case, can I have a second? Commissioner Gavin. All right. Any questions or comments from the public? Seeing none. Any comments or questions from the committee members? All right. Seeing none. Hate to steal staff's thunder, but all those in favor, raise your hand signifying aye. It is unanimous. Jody, we are down 1 again.
Yes.
All right, moving on. So, we are now at approval of historical commission applications. Everyone's getting tired of hearing me read. I'm going to move to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of the following applications as recommended by the Historical Commission at their meeting held on September 23rd, 2024, at which a quorum was not present. First, 938 Summit Road, Penn Valley, Class 2, 2024-R-18. Approval to replace roofing and siding on the residence, re-roof the detached horse stable building, replace non-original window trim with AZEC trim, and remove the chimney behind the front ridge, citing Secretary of the Interior Standards 2 and 9. Second, 300 Glen Road, Ardmore, Class 2, 2024-R-19. Approval to construct retaining walls and other hardscaping improvements to the property and alterations to an existing non-contributing garage, with a subcommittee to review additional information on fencing and piers along Glen Road, citing Secretary of the Interior Standards 2, 9, and 10. Third, 256 Farm Road, Haverford, Class 2, 2024-R-20. Approval to replace 53 windows with a subcommittee to review the final window selections, citing Secretary of the Interior Standards 9. And finally, number 4, 1301 Rose Glen Road, Gladwin, Rolling Hill Park Cottage, Class 1, 2024-R-21. Approval to replace the decking and railing of the front porch, with a subcommittee to review details regarding any potential replacement of the lattice work below the porch and the selection of either painted wood or suitable composite that mimics the tongue and groove porch floor, citing Secretary of the Interior Standard 9. Do I have a second? Thank you, Commissioner Woodring. Save your arm there. All right. Any questions or comments from the public? Seeing none. Any questions or comments from the committee? Seeing none. Any requests of the committee to separate any one of these? All right. Seeing none. All those in favor, raise your hand signifying aye. Jody, it is unanimous. Again, -1. You're doing great. Do you guys want to just start reading some of these for me? All right, we have our last 2 items. So this is the appointments to the Historical Commission, and I will make a motion to recommend to the Board of Commissioners the appointment of Thomas Normile to the Historical Commission for a 5-year term, such term to expire October 2029, and the appointment of Jennifer Jagowski, Heon, and Yair Keshet as alternates to the Historical Commission. Do I have a second? Thank you, Commissioner Gavin. Any questions or comments from the public? Seeing none. Questions or comments from the committee? Commissioner Gavin.
I've said it before and I'll say it again. We are lucky to have an abundance of wonderful residents who volunteer their time and expertise, and thank all those who applied, and Jennifer and Yair and Thomas for their service to our township.
All right, thank you very much. Anyone else? Seeing... no?
Yeah, I just wanted to note really quickly, as you noted, Commissioner Whalen, we didn't have a quorum at our last meeting, unfortunately. We did have 2 retirements recently and 1 death, unfortunately, on the commission, but fortunately, we had 3 really great candidates this time around, so we're really happy to be welcoming them, hopefully, at our next meeting later this month.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. Seeing no other questions or comments, all those in favor, raise your hand signifying aye. It is unanimous. And finally, we are at our last agenda item, the reappointment and appointment to the Zoning Hearing Board. I'm going to make a recommendation to the Board of Commissioners for the reappointment of Alan Ritterband to the Zoning Hearing Board for a 3-year term, such term to expire October 2027, and the appointment of Georgette Phillips as an alternate to the Zoning Hearing Board. Do I have a second? Thank you, Commissioner Gavin. Any questions or comments from the public? Seeing none, any questions or comments from the committee? Commissioner Gavin.
I'm not sure if I've said this yet, but we're so fortunate as a township to have such wonderful residents who donate their time and expertise, and so thankful to Alan and Georgette and everyone who applied. Thank you.
Just so that nobody thinks that we are, making light of this, really sitting in the ad hoc committee, and I'm sure Commissioner Stevenson would shake his head yes, we are truly blessed and fortunate to have an overwhelming abundance of not only phenomenally qualified people to sit on all of these boards, but also all of these phenomenally qualified people want to sit on the boards and are actively trying to get on our boards. This is really an embarrassment of riches that we should all be very happy and proud of. So, seeing no other further comments or questions, all those in favor, raise your hand signifying aye. Commissioner Stevenson, raise your hand. Thank you. And it is unanimous. And we are done.
Thank you, Commissioner Whalen. That is some record time right there. Our next and final committee meeting is the Open Space and Township. That will be me chairing in the absence of our chair and vice chair. We have 2 items on tonight's agenda. The first is an approval to renew a telecommunications land lease agreement with Crown Atlantic Company, LLC. I'll make a motion to recommend to the Board of Commissioners authorizing renewal of a telecommunications land lease agreement between the Township of Lower Merion and Crown Atlantic Company, LLC for existing equipment located at 1700 Waverly Road, Gladwin. Can I get a second? Thank you, Commissioner Gavin. And I will turn things over to Brandon Ford for an explanation.
Thank you, Commissioner. And for those curious, the Phils are still up 1-0.
The Phils are down 4-1.
Oh,
that fast.
I'm sorry about that.
Nice job, Brandon.
I will take full responsibility. My wife is a New Yorker, so I might stay here tonight.
I vote no.
Is your probationary period?
So the first item we have before the board to consider is a land lease renewal. The township does own a telecommunications tower located at 1700 Waverly in Gladwin. This is an existing lease, so it is a renewal. The current lease has been in place since 1996 and most recently amended in 2011. Through negotiation with Crown Castle LLC, who is the current tenant with the existing lease, we have come to terms with the renewal that is before you today, which continues all the current conditions of the current lease, with 3 notable exceptions. The first amendment to the lease would be to extend the lease. The current lease is scheduled to end in 2032. With this amendment, we would add an additional 4 5-year terms, which would carry the lease out to 2052. The second amendment would be a rent increase. The amendment would keep the current rent as it is for the current term, which ends in 2027. which is currently $2,114 a month. But starting June 1st, 2027, that rent would increase to $3,000 a month. And that would increase, as is the current standard of the lease, 10% per term. So at the end of each of those 4 additional terms, the rent would increase 10%. And the third amendment that is of note would be a one-time payment of $25,000. And that's generated from a little bit of a disagreement. We tried to get a little bit of a higher rent, but instead of, that higher initial rent for the current term that ends in 2027, we negotiated a one-time $25,000 payment. Just so to summarize, the 3 amendments to the current lease would be to extend it to 2052, would be the rent increase, which would start June 1st, 2027, that would increase it to $3,000 a month, and then finally that one-time payment of $25,000.
Thank you for that. Any comments from the member of the public who's in the room? I see no. Anybody online, Madam Secretary?
No.
All right. Okay. With that, all in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Our second agenda item is an approval to enter into a telecommunications rental lease agreement with Dish Wireless LLC. And I'll make a motion to recommend to the Board of Commissioners authorizing a telecommunications tower rental lease with Dish for the placement of wireless antenna on the existing township-owned tower located at 915 Youngsford Road in Gladwin. Can I get a second? Thank you, Commissioner Gavin. Brandon, please tell us more.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner. So this is a new lease. The township also owns a telecommunication tower at 915 Youngsford Road in Gladwin. We currently have 3 tenants on that tower with room for 1 additional tenant for a 4th one. Dish Wireless reached out to the township mid-year last year and expressed an interest in adding their equipment to the tower. And through negotiations with them, we've come to the terms that are before you tonight. The full lease was included in the packet, which carries a lot of the terms and conditions that we have in all of our other leases. But of notable comment, we would have an initial starting monthly rent of $3,500 a month. So that would start, within the time period after installation on the tower. And unlike the previous lease that we talked about, where we had term increases, this lease, upon mutual agreement with Dish, has a 2% annual rent increase. So instead of increasing at the end of each term, this lease would increase the rent every year, and that would be increased at a rate of 2%.
Thank you for that. Any comments from members of the public in the room? Anyone online? Any commissioner comment or questions? Yeah. Commissioner Bernheim.
Yeah, Brandon, why the different rental rates between the 2 agreements? What's market rate?
We do compare it to what the other tenants are paying on each of the towers. This tower on Youngsford Road it's taller, so there is the equipment is larger. There are more cables, and in the opinion of staff, requires a larger monthly rent, which is comparable to the other tenants on that tower.
And then when you say, so it's larger and they'll have more equipment than compared to what Crown Castle is going to have on theirs?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Commissioner Kramer.
I think it's great that we're having new contracts to improve service in some parts of the township. Yeah. But I think that those of us in the Bala-Cynwyd area have absolutely abysmal service. And if the township could find some way to perhaps work with some of these folks to get other locations that would improve the service in our community, I can tell you that all of my constituents would be incredibly grateful, as would Louis.
Thank you, Commissioner, and if I could speak to that just real quickly. We are happy to have those conversations. We've actually had those conversations with Commissioner Epstein regarding improved communications on the other side of the township, but we're also happy to have those conversations with the service providers. Granted, we can't make them make such investments in the township, but it doesn't hurt to ask.
Thank you. Any other commissioner comment or questions? All right. With that, all in favor? Any opposed? Passes unanimously, Madam Secretary. And that concludes the business of the Open Space and Township Properties Committee. I do have one announcement before we wrap up tonight. We'd like to remind our residents to register to vote for the upcoming general election on November 5th. The registration deadline is October 21st. You can visit vote.pa.gov, I think, to register online and find additional helpful information concerning voting. In addition, we'd like to remind our residents that a mail-in voting drop box is available in the parking lot of Ludington Library at 5 South Bryn Mawr Avenue in Bryn Mawr, which is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You may also drop your mail-in ballot at the Montgomery County Voter Services Temporary Satellite Office at the Magisterial District Court at 925 Montgomery Avenue in Narberth. Hours do vary, so please check before stopping by. Thank you, and good evening. That concludes the business of the meeting, of whatever.